Let me give you a history lesson on the weight classes in weightlifting. At the start, there were no weight categories, but as the sport evolved, it became more apparent that weight categories were needed. In 1905, they added 3, a 70 kilo lightweight, 80 kilo middleweight, and over 80 kilo class. In 1913, they remade the categories, creating 5 categories, from 60 kilos to above 82.5 kilos. These classes would become the first classes at the Olympics, debuting at the 1920 Olympics. They kept these classes for a while, adding more classes as they went along, until they hit a wall. The clean and press was too difficult to judge, so in 1972, they decided to abolish the move and reset all the records in all weight classes, keeping the same weight classes in the process. This was great for about 20 years until the Seoul Olympics, where Bulgarian doping scandals put the sport's anti-doping policies in question. In response, they enacted many rules, and eventually decided on resetting the categories in 1993. Less than a decade later, they would reset the categories again in 1998. These categories would last for another 20 years. Eventually, the level of doping in the sport would be called into question again. As such, they would reset the categories again in 2018. Today, less than a decade later, it seems like they're gonna pull another 1998 on us. Recently, the IWF approved of new weight classes, creating the following 16 classes. Here's why they're doing so. The IWF wants all the weight classes to be represented at the Olympics. After the previous doping scandals, the IOC has limited them down to only having 120 lifters, enough spots for 5 weight classes per gender. By going and reducing the amount of classes back to 8, it may help convince the IOC to give the IWF more spots at the Olympics. If this attempt fails, at the very least it reduces the amount of non-Olympic classes. Not only that, but it also makes it easier to schedule and host events. Right now, with 10 categories, they can squeeze it all into 9 days. But with 8 categories, they can squeeze it into 8 or 7 days, greatly reducing the cost associated with hosting an event. For us fans of the sport, it has some benefit. It makes it easier to follow the meta of weightlifting. Less weight classes means less classes to keep track of. It increases the chances that the top weightlifters have to compete with each other. With 10 classes, the best can spread out, but with less, they can't. What about the categories themselves? For the men's, I think the proposed classes are pretty good. Having a bigger heavyweight class with the 110s is good, and removing the sub 60 kilo class is nice. Another major advantage of the approved classes is the difference in weight between each class. To cut from the 110 kilo class to the 98 kilo class is around a 10% body weight cut. To cut from the 98 kilo class to the 88 kilo class is also about a 10% body weight cut. To cut from the 88 kilo class to the 79 kilo class is also a 10% body weight cut. To cut from 79 kilos to 71 is again another 10% body weight cut. Though from 71 to 65 and 65 to 60, it's a little bit less. Overall, these categories are more well spread out than the old categories. Fun fact, the jump between 96 to 109 in the old categories and the old 94 to 105 classes are almost the same bodyweight jumps as the jumps between the proposed 98 and 110 kilo classes. The women's classes bucks this trend of bodyweight jumps, as the proposed classes seems to take us back to the old weight classes, with the only real change being the 76/75 kilo class going up to 77 kilos to merge with the 81 kilo class, moving the 87 kilo class down to 86 kilos. Though I would say 48 is still pretty low, I'm not gonna lie. What does this mean for the meta of weightlifting? Well, for women, it's not that hard. Most will go down a kilo, except for those in the 55, 71, and 81 kilo classes, who are now faced with a dilemma. Those in the 81 kilo class have the biggest dilemma. This changes things a lot for men, especially those who are in the 73, 81, or 89 kilo classes. It most likely means the lightest class to clean and jerk 200 kilos will be the 79s. But there are some problems with them changing it in my personal opinion. It messes with the highest level of athletes. It takes some time for an athlete to truly perform at their peak in a certain weight class. With all the changes to the Olympic classes over the past decade, it has pushed athletes to bulk and cut dramatically. This can really mess up an athlete's preparation for the Olympics if they are unsure of what weight class that they will be. Not only that, but it's confusing for the casual fans. If you're not that into weightlifting, someone who only really watches the Olympics, you probably aren't aware that the IWF makes changes to these weight classes or why. Someone who only watches the Olympics is going to be confused if in 2024, Risky sets an Olympic record with a 199 kilo clean and jerk. And then in 2028, Risky again sets an Olympic record with a 199 kilo clean and jerk. You'll have people asking, why is it a record if he did the same thing 4 years ago? This confusion may deter people from watching weightlifting at the Olympics, which is a bad thing for the sport at large. It's also frustrating for the fans competing. Imagine you've bulked up to the women's 81 kilo class, only to find out that the IWF is changing it to the 77 kilo class. Now you have to decide, do you go up to the 86s or down to the 77s? In some cases, this may convince lifters not to bother participating in weightlifting events, which is bad for the sport at large. I understand why they are doing this and agree that there needs to be less classes, and I actually like most of the classes themselves. Though despite these benefits, I still think that completely changing the weight categories is a bad thing. In my opinion, the IWF could have achieved most of the same results by removing the men's 55 kilo, 102 kilo, women's 45 kilo, and 81 kilo classes. Instead, they are taking a radical approach that could potentially put the sport at large in risk. If it works out, it most likely means these weight classes will be the thing for the next 20 years or hopefully more. These weight categories roll out in June of 2025. The history of weightlifting is evolving as we speak, so get ready, because it's bulking season, everyone. Thank you, and have a great day. What the f***, Nino?